Good tidings, all you beautiful individuals. We are back. It is League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys as we continue the preseason power rankings. But now we are shifting to the land of Europia, which surprisingly enough actually had the craziest offseason of most of the major regions.
Most of the time, it's the LEC trying to adapt, trying to change, trying to find that new talent from the EU Masters to replace what North America is poaching away, what we're signing with a big fat contract. That didn't happen this offseason. I know it is the change to summer and less likely to see stuff like that, but we've seen it in the past. So this is a different type of change and retooling around in the LEC. And oh boy, there's been some big shakeups to some established rosters.
Most of them having to do with role swaps. It's not replacing NA or EU players going to NA. It's just replacing players within your own roster, just role swapping around. So we're going 10-6 today. We'll do the top 5 in another episode. And I want to preface this as we get to this number 10 team by saying we've had years past of Vitality, ASTRALIS that, you know, you feel like was a clearly 10th place weak team. I don't think we have that this year. I think the entire bottom 4 is serviceable and going to be competitive and capable of upsets.
That is actually something extremely exciting about the LEC heading towards this summer split, is realizing what we saw from the spring split, right? Seeing that little bit of a run towards the end of the split of where it actually did matter. It didn't matter, you know, for the most part, you would expect it not to matter, but it really did. Those last couple of weeks, who was going to be getting that last spot in and what they could do to fight against the rest of them, right? Showing that spark at the very bottom. I think we should see that this summer split. That's not meant to say, you know, it's going to be all magnificent, perfect 10 out of 10 gameplay, but it sure is going to be a step up from what I think most people would assume or what we've been used to seeing from bottom feeder squads.
It's a lot different than the LCS, I'll tell you that much. But the number 10 team for the LEC, and despite the big run in week 8 last year, XL, you had them beating both G2 and Rogue. You can say what you want because it's the final week. They were kind of already locked in for that 1-2 spot, so maybe not as impactful, but XL almost completed the miracle run into playoffs, so how can they be at number 10? A couple roster changes. Nukeduck coming back. We're happy to see him back. We're happy he's ready and playing again, but you feel like even though Checolad maybe wasn't as hyped up as people thought, I still feel like it's a step back.
It's a rough situation, right? A rock and a hard place type of thing where you have this move coming through where at the one hand, you see Nukeduck coming back into the scene. You have to look at it like anybody else, right? Giving another individual a chance. And Nukeduck, at the very least throughout his gameplay and the history of his career, I think has earned himself one of these chances that can be cashed in. But the problem is when you start asking, you know, as you said, with the rest of these changes, and you're looking at this opportunity being cashed in at the expense of Checolad being ousted from this XL team and everything else that this means, to me, the value is not coming through. That even though I want to be someone that says that, you know, that will be positive and supportive for this type of move and welcoming in, I'm not seeing it work out. And that is, to me, a very negative thing, given the way that XL had been trending positively over the course of the last, like, 2 or 3 splits. You can look at very minor things, you know, to small things that had been progress in every category that you would want as an organization trying to, you know, get that birth through in the LEC and establish yourself. This was not the off season in that direction.
They're still the playoff bubble team for XL, and you talk about the bottom half of the table still being strong. I feel like XL, who we have at 10th, could still surprise and fight for one of those final playoff spots. It's very close between this whole 10-7 area. But XL, even Patrick, you know, the guy we've hyped up, he's been at an all-pro level for a lot of the last few splits. Didn't feel like he was quite at that level in spring. And you can talk about, okay, maybe Torre was part of it. Maybe just the overall talent level of other AD carries in Europe is insane, which it is, by the way.
Yeah, it absolutely is insane at the marksman position over in the LEC, but that shouldn't mean really anything to someone like Patrick, who has considered himself to be one of those top players at that position. And in order to be in that spot, you got to be having the numbers to contribute to that. And you said it, last split, they weren't there. They weren't up to that level. And even just the eyeball test, right? Watching them in these team fights, it wasn't the same level of lethality as other ADCs in the region or even himself in prior seasons. So that is something I think if we're talking about Excel trying to fight up, be a strong team towards at the bottom end of the standings, Patrick's going to need to bounce back if we're going to see anything like that.
If you remove the last week for Excel, then it was a very underwhelming spring, and you can't even really carry that momentum fully from week 8 because, again, you got at least 2 roster changes coming in to the summer split. Number 9 squad, maybe some people would want in at number 10. It is ASTRALIS, and much like Excel to close out spring, they had a fantastic week 8. They went 3-0, Mark, to save their record. They had the meme game against Mad Lions where it was full troll picks across the board, so maybe it doesn't count as much. But the reason we have them ahead of Excel is, number 1, it's the same returning 5, so you have that built-in chemistry. And you saw this team get better, especially the second half of the split. And one of the main reasons it seemed like they got better is MAGIFELIX in the mid lane. I want to see another split of him developing, and he alone is, an argument enough to have them ahead of Excel.
You nailed it. Based on MAGIFELIX alone and his progression, what we saw in that small sample size of his game starting in the spring split, absolutely, that has to be the hope. That has to be the reason why you're looking at anything positive for ASTRALIS into this summer split. You're right, with the rest of the 5, the rest of the 4 members of this roster returning with MAGIFELIX in the mid lane is something to build upon, and the wins that they did pick up and the form that they showed in those wins, more than good enough to be competitive throughout the LEC summer split, and that is going to be something that we want to be keeping our eye on. But you said it, number 1 is going to be that continued growth, continued, being more comfortable, right, in your own skin in the LEC is going to be the big thing for MAGIFELIX, because once he feels that, absolutely, you're going to start seeing more of these comfortable levels of performance come through. And when he's comfortable, my man, there's going to be a lot of skill expressed out on the Rift.
And for him, I think, because we've heard all this stuff about nerves on stage for him, easing into things as a consistent starter and pro player with all the remote play that we've had throughout all of COVID the last couple of splits, it's helped a guy like him, I can only imagine. Eventually, when the LEC is back to playing on stage on that regular, consistent basis, maybe he'll be warmed up and comfortable enough that he won't be as nervous on there.
I would hope so. Number 1 is that is going to be something important to keep track of, but as well in that, that line of thought, we have seen from other regions, from the LCK, from the LCS, that there are plans to get some players and teams back into the studio for the split and everything like that. But what we have heard from the LEC is that's not going to be the case over there, that it is going to still be online play, at least for the start of the split. That is going to be what we keep track of. And as you said, for someone like MAGIFELIX, that, however much faith you want to put into the talk about having some nerves on stage, that type of situation, this can only be viewed as a positive, a soft landing, and again, a better start for this ASTRALIS for summer split.
And another quick shout out to Jeskla for how he's played in the turnaround for ASTRALIS, because he's still a relatively young player. He had a couple I don't even want to say questionable splits. He just was on a not great team for a couple of splits, and people are so quickly to write off someone for their entire career. But this guy, much like MAGIFELIX, still has plenty to grow and get better at, and there were definitely glimpses of it in spring.
If you asked me before the spring started whether you would be, excited, any type of hype around ASTRALIS in this second half of the year and what you wanted to see from them, any type of growth, we were
harsh. We were harsh coming in the spring. They were an easy 10th place team. I think overall, you look at spring, they outperformed what we were expecting.
I think easily outperforming what we expected, what everyone expected. And then especially when you add in, right, the addition of MAGIFELIX and what he did and his own individual growth, that you got to be really one grumpy individual to not be wanting to see ASTRALIS continue to improve and continue to progress through the LEC standings.
And that's the main thing, is now you feel like there's more people rooting for them than before, where they were just demean as OG, rebranding to ASTRALIS. Number 8 on the list, we talked about the great, fantastic endings. Week 8 in particular for the number 10 and 9 teams. It was not the case for number 8. We're talking SK Gaming. They closed out the regular season on a 5-game win streak. Or not win streak, 5-game losing streak, barely scraped their way into playoffs, managed to somehow have a competitive series against Fnatic before ultimately still losing in 4 games. And then you come into this offseason. The combination of the slump at the end and then TREATZ, of course, role swapping to the jungle and having Jez as your head coach come in to support, who hasn't played professionally in a couple of years. I don't have as much faith.
It felt like, everything that you wanted, even with considering, the 5-game losing streak towards the playoffs and everything that went through from SK, it felt like still getting a birthday cake. And someone dropped it a little bit, but it's not completely smushed. You got a couple candles in there still.
You can still read the message. Yeah.
We can save it. And then all of a sudden, the dog comes in and says it's time to go to the bathroom all over the cake. And that's what you're looking at with this SK roster change. And I want to be positive, right? You want to look at this and feel, and let alone carrying the positives and everything that you want to see continue to develop and grow for a mostly young SK team and what they can do to continue to grow and establish themselves in the LEC. The problem is when you see these type of changes coming through, how can you feel like this is positive momentum for this group after the way things ended?
Now, okay, we'll try and spin it in a positive way, because in that Fnatic series, I think it was pretty obvious, glaringly obvious, that TiNX was outmatched against Selfmade. And now you could say, okay, well, TREATZ hasn't played jungle professionally really before. So now, okay, is that really going to be an upgrade? Hard to say. Obviously, got to see games on the Rift. Jez I said he hasn't played in a long time, but he is a veteran, one of the biggest veterans in the scene. So helping develop a guy like Jezu, who he already has a relationship with as a head coach. And then the top side, Genax was surprisingly one of the better top laners in the LEC. So there are some positives you can pull from this SK squad.
I want to be careful, right, with how much, we talk about them in this type of sense, because yes, this is a squad that, come halfway through the summer split, you could be looking at in quite a prime position or having turned things around or adapted quickly. But out of the gates here, the preseason type of look into this, I'm not one that's buying in on these type of changes and these things. I like what you talked about with identifying that TiNX was, as far as the development, the continued progression of this group, of this team, was the part that was lagging. And, even if you want to talk about bringing TREATZ over, we've seen in solo queue, I know solo queue has been more than okay on the jungle champions. And we know that he is probably the premier team fighting engaged player on this roster. So to put him in that position, more than okay. But as you said, talking about Jez is coming in after such a time off and what you can expect, that's where I start to have a lot more questions for this team and what they're going to be getting done. I liked it as well that you brought up Genax, because his level of performance and what I think above expectations, that could be a big key for them to try and weather this early storm, these adaptations and changes.
It's not season 3 and 4 anymore. You can't really hide your support. It's a very important role. You need to have pretty damn good mechanics to play a lot of these champions, especially some of even the newer supports, whether it's Rel, Thresh is always going to be a meta pick, landing great Alistar combos. You got to have good mechanics. Not saying Jesus doesn't. He's still pretty high up in solo queue, but it's a lot of work to be doing 2v2s and then engaging and all the vision control. So I'm curious to see how Jesus is going to fit back into the pro scene. Number 7 on the list is also some changes that were not for the better, I'm going to say, and that's partially out of their control. We're talking about Schalke, who I was so excited for summer. Bring back the gang. These guys can apparently be legit threats towards the top 3. We saw them go to 5 games against G2, play competitive games against Rogue, and win some of these regular season matchups. But as soon as you lose ABBEDAGGE to the cash cow that is the LCS, it is a huge blow to this Schalke lineup. And then Gilius also getting subbed out for Kire. I'm not sold on that move either.
Yeah, this is a super villain nade shot coming through to ruin the Schalke dreams that we've been looking at and we've been feeling about. It's just a feels bad man type of situation after seeing the potential, right, that these young guys, this group that they could have had and what they could have been doing. And then to think about, yes, there were shortcomings. Yes, a lot of times some of the gameplay was pretty volatile. But as well, realizing that they're owed, just like anybody else, the opportunity to learn from that, to fix these mistakes, to approach it again here in summer and try to be a more consistent, explosive version that they've been. It's not really going to be the case when you lose such a core and valuable member in ABBEDAGGE. And then, as you said as well, even swapping away from Gilius, this is not a move that I'm fully convinced of right now for the LEC and for where Schalke was expecting that, where they had been in the spring split and where you would have expected them to try and compete and try to push up for in summer split. This is not the roster to me to do that.
Yeah, all of a sudden the expectations have changed from, potentially fighting maybe even for a world spot to now I think it's pulled back and you're fighting for a playoff spot is kind of the ideal situation because ABBEDAGGE was that powerful a force in the mid lane in the LEC. And listen, Gilius, you love the personality. He works so well with Broken Blade and ABBEDAGGE. They were best pals. I'm happy for Kire because he's a guy who he's been around for a long time. He's been playing for 5+ years professionally. He's gotten, unfortunately, into some tough scenarios, tough rosters that he's had to play on. Misfits, he's playing a handful of games before he's getting subbed out. But there were moments where he's looked really good in the LEC. I hope he kind of gets the full split to be able to play with the same squad as the starter.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where, look, might not be in support of the decision in the first place type of thing. And that's less about Kyria as a player, more so about what Gilius can provide. And I think the X factor that he can be on very certain teams, certain situations. But when you talk about what they're going to be doing, what the expectations have to be, my question, my concern now becomes, to the rumors that we had heard about Schalke in the past, as far as, whether they were going to sell the LEC slot. Now you don't got ABBEDAGGE, you're moving all these type of weird things around in situation. Now that's where my question mark is heading towards. Less about the actual gameplay that's been going on, which is what you want the conversation to be about. And that is just a sad time for Schalke fans.
And with all these moves, we already saw glimpses of it in the playoffs. Broken Blade getting pentakills on Darius, looking super clean. Now with the new look roster, they're probably putting even more resources and more eggs in the Broken Blade basket. I don't know if that's going to be good or bad for Schalke.
Yeah, that absolutely can go two ways, and I'm sure we're going to see both of them. Knowing Broken
100%.
Blade, yeah, there's going to be some busted brains. You better believe that, and there's going to be some of us wanting to bust our brains watching Broken Blade make some plays and decisions. That's the life of it, and that's the way it is. But it is, as you said, fun to see, and I think overall was a continued positive progression, at the very least, in his career's individual development this past split.
Yeah, and he was a classic case at times where people were memeing in a lot of discussion, like, okay, he can't play this champion, but then all of a sudden he turns things around. He's playing the Aatrox super well. The Darius we saw, he had some good other split pushing, solo killing, assassin types in the top lane. So if he's getting more resources, I'm excited to see it because the ceiling and potential is absolutely still there for Broken Blade. And regardless of what the future of Schalke is, this is going to be a great opportunity for him to showcase what he can do topside.
Yeah, well, hey, if we see him styling on people on Ornn, that's when we know the talent suppression machine is a real deal curse.
And he couldn't play against Aatrox on TSM. Just play it yourself, and you're good to go. That's the way to do it. But Schalke absolutely can be vying for one of those playoff spots, but for now we got them at number 7. Finally, we get to number 6, which is the playoff bubble. There's no 8 teams making it in the LEC, and with Schalke and SK both making some roster changes that I think you and I both see as downgrades, you get to put Misfits in at number 6 because they're not really making any changes, and much like some of these other squads, they had a great closeout in the final couple of weeks, and we forget how crazy close that final playoff race was, and Misfits were playing super well. They just didn't have the tiebreaker because they had the same record as SK.
And this is a point that I'll bring up every single opportunity that I get when you want to talk about Misfits in the spring split and everything else. You want to talk about ADCs, the marksmen in the European region. Oh, the guy like Kabe putting up the performance that he did in spring and going completely under the radar in the return to the LEC. Yeah. Real full-time opportunity in this situation. And what he was able to do with this, mostly Misfits core and what they, did towards the last half, putting that momentum in. Absolutely. With some of the instability and the changes and question marks around the rest of the LEC, they benefit and slide on into this spot in the power ranking.
And it's tough because some of the other guys, I mean, Vetio, we saw some moments of him. He had some great Zoe play. He's still another developing younger player. Razork, we've seen so early on in his career how high he can reach, literally an all-pro level. And Hear It really turned it on to close out the regular season in spring as well. So for Misfits, it's a fine line because, as you saw, they've only made playoffs once in the last 5 splits. They've been pretty damn close in a lot of these other ones. But with all these other teams kind of taking a step back, you really feel like this is the time for Misfits to get into playoffs.
This feels like everyone's playing Mario Kart. Everyone's trying to get that head start, right? They're trying to time that thing. But then, oh no,
Mash A.
Everyone screws up. They get the stall right out of the gates, and Misfits has just been waiting for the light to turn green, and then they hit A and just cruise on out of there.
They're the 1A press. Everyone else is mashing, not getting the time right. Misfits.
There it is. That's the secret right there. But that's how I envisioned this going this split. Everyone's trying their best to try and go, and someone's getting a false start. Someone's going to get this type of mistake, all that type of stuff. Misfits, if they just keep cruising along, slowly improving, making that progress, I think we're going to be happy where they end up. Because absolutely, if you're talking about, that car ramping up, hitting the pedal to the metal, and all of a sudden we're talking about fighting G2, Mad Lions, Rogue. I think that's a different category. Yeah. We have that car is being outclassed at that point.
Lap 2 hits a little different on this Mario Kart map.
Absolutely. But the thing is, important to remember that, yes, as you said, there are those things, but there has been good progress. There has been a lot of, and throughout almost every game, at least one bright spot, bright moment coming through when you look at these young players and how they can continue to progress. I'm in on buying in on the continued progression for this Misfits team. I just think that you're going to have to still be patient and understanding that this is not the ultimate prize winning group.
But again, the biggest thing to take away from these 10-6 power rankings for the LEC is there's no 2-16 looking squad coming into this. And honestly, ASTRALIS or XL could be in legit contention to get that number 6 spot. So these bottom 5, I expect to be shifting around the standings a whole lot in the summer split.
This is not meant to be an NA sucks, EU's better type of situation. And
well, that's every episode we do, isn't it?
Yeah, more or less. But it is something when you can look at these teams and talk about where you want them and the potential and expectations for all of them, and realizing that, yes, the one that we just talked about, Misfits, is the only one that would be in that playoff spot, holding that last line. Very different than we were talking, previewing North America and talking about the quality that you would have in that territory from 6 to 8 that's getting into playoffs. Come on, North America, let's tighten it up.
It just feels like they're all very close, and Misfits is slightly ahead in the starting race for this summer split. But it's going to be just another split where you say the LEC overall level of play and competition is much higher than that of the LCS. And until the import rule gets lifted, it's probably going to stay that way. That's just...
no import rule, please. None of that conversation.
That's just the name of the game.
Yeah, I am excited by that idea of the Misfits holding down number 6 and these squads fighting for that last spot. You better believe it's going to be a foldy sheet type of ending to the LEC summer split.
Going to be a fun time in Europe again, but that's it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys. Thanks for hanging. We'll catch you on the flippity flip.